Welcome back to the Golden Hour Ambient Music and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Collette, a.k.a. Gollden, and today you're listening to episode 10 with 6 Missing. When I started this podcast, I really wanted my content to focus more on a radio show, predominantly playing music, and I always wanted to highlight the artists featured on the show, but I didn't actually envision interviewing them. Because ambient music is often predominantly instrumental, it's experimental, and it's often listened to and experienced in different settings, and sometimes even listened to for specific purposes. I find that there naturally is less of an emphasis on the artist, and I'm coming to find out that many artists even have ambient side projects, or ambient music projects as one of their side projects under pseudonyms, just out of the need to create experimental music without anyone really knowing anything about them. I'm super excited for this episode because I finally got the chance to sit down and chat with my good friend and ambient artist, award-winning sound designer, composer, and multi-instrumentalist, T.J Dumser, otherwise known as 6 Missing. We chat about everything from his earlier days as a musician and a sound engineer, collaborations, and the journey of a solo ambient artist, and of special insight and introduction into an exciting new chapter for TJ.
You never watched 30 Rock?
I don't think so. I'm terrible. I'm terrible with anything to do with TV, movies, like pop culture, in the know of anything. I'm like very rarely sit down, watch anything. So, yeah.
Well, that's actually pretty interesting. I'm going to just force you to just get right into this right now then, if that's okay. Okay. I really like watching like television and movies. Anything with like storytelling, I think, is really intriguing to me, but also comedy. So what I was going to say about the 30 Rock stuff is that when the character of Jack Donaghy, played by Alec Baldwin, gets in front of a camera, he all of a sudden forgets how to walk. And so he's like doing an awkward thing where he's like, I forget how to do it. Anyways.
That happens to me, like, forget my name. Wait, what do I do? I don't know. It's like a deer in headlights moment.
Yeah. It takes a lot of like, I think that's why I've found a lot more comfort like recording in this type of setup where I'm just kind of like by myself alone in the studio, because I spend most of the time in the studio and most of the time I work remotely. So I'm by myself as well. So I'm like very comfortable in the setting, but I feel like I've seen a lot of people go to studios. I used to go to studios. I used to work at studios, and like, yeah, obviously having, millions of dollars worth of equipment and gear and synths and just toys in front of you is an amazing opportunity to be in. But I feel like I get like a little stifled in that setting, like where it's a little like too sterile, maybe. Like it's like not as comfortable. I feel like I have to come with an idea as opposed to like sitting there and like just trying stuff, because I can just do that here in my studio. I just feel very comfortable. Like I'm not performing really. I'm not in front of my band. I'm not in front of a producer, an engineer that I know is being paid probably a little too little to be there and be like, okay, fella, like you don't know what you're doing yet. So I don't know. I think specifically for our genre, like ambient soundscape, meditative sound art, like I don't know how that would translate really to like going to an actual studio, booking like a day. It would feel really weird. I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't done it with six Missing, this project yet. But I used to do it with bands. But yeah, I feel very comfortable just sitting in the studio, and just if nothing comes out of it, then that's fine. Like you're just at least still playing,
Yeah, and I totally agree because I spend so much time playing, where I was in studios and playing in bands and rehearsing, and I very rarely went into a studio and with things that were not rehearsed. It wouldn't just be a jam and then that would become a
But
song.
you just did that,
But
right? You've done that a few times.
yes, and that came those special moments where musicians go into a place and where everything came together collectively, and there was just a matter of pressing record, and out of that became amazing recording. And because there was no pressure, it was not an expected, this is going anywhere. We're on a time crunch. I've been in the studio and have X amount of time, and this guy's tired, and he's been probably up since the night before. I can feel the energy, and everybody wants to go home. And like, we're, as the ambient stuff at home in our own spaces, it's a very different way of writing music and playing music, and creating.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could see, even while you were talking about that, I was thinking of kind of like ways that it would be interesting to explore going into a situation where there is a bit more pressure or a bit more like a time crunch or something. I could see how that actually could be like an interesting experiment to do something like that to make it happen under those constraints. But that's sort of how like I work anyways on my own because I have my day job and that demands and requires a lot of time and it's a full-time job despite working for myself. But when I get those windows, I get blocks of time in like an hour, 2 hours at most a day I get. And that's really rare, but it's usually like, okay, I like to keep kind of like a pretty tight normal schedule so things don't get weird and wobbly and I'm just working all the time. So I usually try to stop at 6 my time. And if I'm done at like 5:15 and then I know, we're going to enter into our evening routine, I give myself that like 45 minutes and just be like, what can I do in this amount of time? Like, so just go kind of like, is there a track that I had started on or was working on? Or like a shameless plug for our track that we just did together.
Yeah.
Like that's how that came about, where it was like you sent me the files and I just started working on it that day because I was like, I know if I don't do it right now, it could be 3 weeks until I touch this again. So I guess I do like to give myself those time constraints because it also, I don't know, it like weeds out some of the mental hurdles that you can put in your way where you're like second guessing yourself or doubting yourself if it's like working or not. I just usually try to like give that like in and out time, throw as much paint at the wall as I possibly can, and then come back on a different day and edit and listen back and see what stays, see what goes, see if it inspires something new. But yeah, so I guess as I was saying that, I was like, I guess I would be fine to go into a studio. He said that it would cost a lot more money to do something like that. Yeah.
Do you find that you work well in structure? Are you a structured person?
Yes. I think that I don't know how to not work that way. And that is truly because I am like very much self-diagnosed obsessive compulsive in those tendencies where I get tons of anxiety if I don't kind of like have a idea of what I'm doing, or if I haven't done certain things like I'll overshare. But like
That's fine.
if I have cables out in the room from the session before, um, I can't, it's like my mind, it's a representation of my mind. Like it's like cluttered then. So I need to like organize the room, put stuff away, literally even visually not see the thing. And then I can start fresh on something. Um, but I mean, I can be flexible in the ways that like if something is just coming, I'll just run with it. But yes, normally I like to structure my day in a way that, you were asking about like wellness and stuff. I like to stay active because engineering, mixing, musicking, it's like a very sedentary thing
For
for
sure.
it can be very long stretches of time. Like when we do a voiceover record or something, it's, 2 hours of just being seated, agency work, commercial work. It's all just nobody remembers to eat or drink water or anything like that. So I try to like start the day with a run or a long walk, and then eating breakfast. And if I don't eat breakfast, I feel like the day gets all thrown off, and then I'm just kind of like unfocused all day. Coffee, tons of water, all of that stuff. But all that was to say that, yeah, I like to keep a pretty neat and tidy schedule. I feel like it's helpful. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if other musicians work that way. I don't know if you work that way either.
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the other side. Definitely scattered, a little bit all over the place. I'm also like been used to be doing multiple jobs at once and then balancing music, and the wellness and my yoga and wellness, on the side. I've always had to do that on top of full-time work, and sometimes my job, it's completely different than art and music. Like a lot of people don't know, but I am a social worker, and it was a big part of my, my work outside of music. I've been on and off in the social work field, which is very different than music.
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of time and energy, but it depends. Like my own personal structure, I have a routine. I have to do some form of movement every day. I have to eat well and balanced. Those are my non-negotiables. As a human, when it comes to music, I try to be a little bit easier on myself, and be more free in my creating and my time, going with it when it comes out instead of getting frustrated. I schedule between 8. I'm a little bit like, sometimes in the morning, it's rare, but even when I was working full time, I wouldn't start tracking until 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I'd be going to like 1 in the morning, 10 to 1. That's my sweet spot. All the music I've created has been in between that time frame. So
the witching hour.
Yeah, I would be super free in that time to create. But it's okay because I'm also a Gemini. I can do a million things at once.
Oh, me too.
It's like a very
When's
it's
your
pretty
birthday?
natural. I'm June 7th.
That's my birthday.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Yeah, June 7th.
No, it isn't.
It is 100% yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And so to further that, so, Gemini being twin, so there's us now sharing the same birthday. My wife's birthday is 7 days before mine, and she is a Gemini as well, and an actual twin, which is
oh my
crazy.
Gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so
2 Geminis.
It's horrible. Like, decision making is a wreck in our household. Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, I can totally.
Whoa, this is so crazy.
Totally see that. I can't believe we have the same birthday. What the hell?
Well, happy almost birthday. We're getting there soon.
I know. That's wild.
That is really crazy. I totally hear what you're saying. And I think that for a lot of people, this is the case, that music is the thing you have to figure out how to fit in. Like it, and I think that's just kind of accepting the reality of what it is these days. I think gone are the days where you can kind of be, I don't know. I mean, like the ideal is that you're just making music full time and somebody's paying you to do that, and you're making enough money off of it to sustain yourself and live the life that you want to live and not struggle and all of this. But those two things are paradoxical, I think, sometimes, unless you are the long career of Bruce Springsteen or the meteoric rise of Taylor Swift or the Ed Sheerans or I don't know, the Brian Enos like of the world. Like it is mostly 99.8% of us have to figure out how to fit in our art, and whether that's music or writing or visual arts or performance arts, it is the thing that you have to balance in life. And I think the thing that I like about limitations is that it helps me focus. It is almost like putting the gear shift on the bike a little bit higher, where you have to like struggle against it a little bit to like make that resistance like wake you up a little bit. And the thing that I've also been trying to get better at, and I think is a skill, and I think successful people in any sort of field have figured out how to read the moments that you were talking about, like where you're like, I'm just not feeling it, versus letting that go and being like, I'm okay with that today, or being like, today's the day I need to actually push pass that hurdle a little bit and see what happens. I'm trying to get better at reading myself on that. Like, when is the right day to step back? When is the right day to push in, lean in, dig in? Um, and then also, yeah, even just with what I said earlier, then hearing what you said about how you create, it's like, yeah, I do that too. It's like being flexible with knowing that it can change, and seasonally it can change day to day. Because yeah, I've had some of like the most creative moments happen when I can't sleep and I just get up and I'll sit and I'll be like, I can't make a lot of noise. And that actually informs like what I'm performing, what I'm playing, what I'm writing. And that's been some of the coolest stuff that I've liked, because it's almost like you can like feel that vibe on it. It's like very tangible, where there was this delicate nature to the guitar. Like, the guitar was so loud, but I was playing so quiet, and it just created like a weird tone that I would have never really thought to seek out. So yeah, I think being flexible with it, reading yourself, accepting that you can change, but also, yeah, having those like guidelines and limitations really just like squeeze out potent energy, I think, sometimes. And I think that's where my output came from for the last few years, was being generally isolated. Like, when we moved, because we moved from New York to a new city at the beginning of the pandemic, so we kind of like launched right into legitimate isolation, and then that kind of zapped my whole momentum of like meeting people, expanding a network where I didn't have one. So I just kind of went internally. I just went inside. Yeah. And I just started writing. And I think also, like, to talk about it, like some heavy depression that came from all of that. And instead of turning to the things I maybe once would have turned to, as far as like negative activities, I just channeled it into writing, and like just sitting down and just being in front of the studio computer at all hours of the day, and just kind of like going for it. So yeah, the end product of depression being music and art is actually, I'm okay with that for now, I guess.
And do you find like, does that feel differently to put your attention differently into to be writing in a looser genre like ambient music? That there's this more healing nature that comes out of writing this music, and that's just for me. But in the past, when you put your energy into your music, would it look differently than during a time of solitude?
Mm, it's a great question.
Was it ever therapeutic, or was music always a therapeutic outlet for
I
you?
think probably, yeah. I mean, yes is the short answer to that. I think that it has transformed and it has matured,
Mm-hmm.
aged in a way that I am now kind of having a different relationship with it. And it's taken on, I don't know, maybe I've just been able to identify the deeper roots that are in it because I'm clearer these days. But music was always an outlet for me. Um, from the very early age, like as early as I can remember, and in videos that I've been shown of myself as a baby, it's like
Uh-huh.
there was music there, and it was just always something that I gravitated towards.
And how did you start playing? Like, what was your very
Ooh,
first like introduction to music? Was there a point in time when you remember sitting down and playing whatever instrument or anything, or singing, or do you remember that moment, that connection?
uh, yeah, my family isn't totally musical.
Mm-hmm.
There's no real like player in the family, no real singer or anything. But my mom, I mean, my mom and my dad are big appreciators of music in different ways. Like, I remember always sitting in my dad's car and him having the oldies station on, so there was always music. My mom was a dance instructor. And so there was always like pop hits. Like, I think my first real thing, there was a lot of like Paula Abdul and like that type of
Nice.
stuff. Yeah, but The first instrument, I don't know. I always wanted a guitar, always. I don't know. Something about it just always drew me in. Maybe it was because like it was just mystical and magical to me that people could pick it up and make those sounds. Um, but yeah, I mean, the first thing was a piano, and that got boring really fast. And it
And
was like
how old were you?
probably like, you know, 10 or something. I was very quickly showing my hand that I didn't enjoy sports.
Yep.
So
Right.
my parents, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not very athletic in that sense. My dad being a big sports guy, a runner his entire life. I came into running later in life, but yeah, they were like, "Well, if you got to do something, like you just can't not do anything." So they tried piano, and my sister and I did it, but I didn't have the patience for it to like sit and learn music, which is a big regret of mine now. But I would
Same.
just memorize. Yeah, I would just memorize all of the stuff by ear, and then play it back and pretend like I was reading the notes. So it was piano that led to guitar, and then from guitar to drums, and then guitar became the big thing. That was the instrument. And every band I was ever in, it was guitar. Found a affinity for bass when I first really heard like Sgt. Pepper's and realized that Paul
Hmm.
McCartney was playing melodies on the bass line that you could actually sing like a vocal line. That blew my mind, and I started having an appreciation for bass. And then from that, you know, it goes and goes and goes. So you can't read music either, huh?
No.
Nice.
No, it is always like, yeah, I was similar. I actually started on bass. That was when I started.
Is that your primary?
I honestly don't even know what my primary is anymore. I mean, I've been learning production and focusing more on the ambient music. On my project, I don't set enough time and where I'm sitting down and
Hmm.
just playing one instrument anymore. Um, if someone was like, "You're going to a jam," I would love to play bass. If there was any instrument that I would pick, I'd probably pick bass, but it's a little bit
Yeah.
hard in ambient music. The last jam that I was at, I ended up bringing a bass to an ambient jam, and no one has, I don't think, done that before, but it's my heart instrument. It's my first instrument. I
What made you pick up
I love
bass?
it.
Like that, you don't ever really hear it. Bass is always out of like the necessity that the person that wants to be in the
I know.
band, all the good positions are taken. Yeah. So what drew you to bass?
Well, I started playing bass
Mm.
around 12, which is pretty young. My brother, who's younger than me, he was around 8 years old, and he was in drum lessons. And my dad was like, "Your brother's playing drums." I was actually learning a little bit as well, and I loved playing. And he was on drums, and I was like, "Well, I should play bass because drum and bass are together." And um, I don't know, I started playing bass and I fell in love. I'll often in every track of mine, my Gollden tracks, there's somewhere I've put in a real bass. Although you can't really tell because it's mixed differently, but I love the organic quality and the warmth and quality of the sound and in the ambient recordings. Um, I always incorporate bass in some way. It doesn't have to be constant, but it just hugs you in these
Mm.
really nice moments. So from bass, um, yeah, and then I naturally picked up guitar. Back to like not learning how to read music. I was so lazy because I could hear it way better than I could read it,
Hmm.
and so I was just like, oh, I can
Hmm.
hear it and play it and find it. And in those early guitar days, when you
Oh
like
yeah.
wanted a guitar tab, and you know how you would
Right.
be looking for a tab and you would see chords, and it clearly wasn't played in those chords or in that structure. It's somewhere else on the guitar, and you can tell the difference between that.
Yeah.
I really could have easily been like a guitar tab writer in the early days of guitar tab because I could hear it
Mm-hmm.
and then I could find
Mm-hmm.
it. And it was just faster. But being lazy and I just wanting to get there as
Yeah.
fast as I can because I could hear it, but I never focused on learning and reading music. But it has its downfalls because if I am with people jamming, it's like what key are you in? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then I go and throw a capo on
Mm-hmm.
it. And then I'm like, great. Now I actually have no idea where I am. But I was listening to an interview a few months ago with Rick Rubin and Flea from the Chili Peppers. And
Oh,
he
Chili Peppers,
had
they're like a
said
new
recently,
band. They're a new and up and coming band, right?
yeah.
I've heard of them. They got a ton of promise.
Oh my God. But he was talking about how he was starting to learn how to teach himself how to
Huh.
read music, and he's gone an entire career. He was saying he has all this music and he's more interested now in learning that kind of other side of playing and understanding the instrument a little bit more from an analytical and theoretical point of view
Mm-hmm.
versus the feeling. So one day I'd love to sit down, just see the other side. When I was outputting so much writing, it was easier to just do it by ear and feel into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very intuitive. And when I started playing guitar, I started writing exactly at the same time. So I'd write the guitar, I would sing, it would all come at the same time. And it was
Wow.
always that way. It was always like I sit down and I don't know, it came at the same
Yeah.
time. But
Wow.
yeah. So if I sat down to write my singer-songwriter music, it would always be guitar and singing in that moment at that time. And I would always just try to be in this like other type of space. It's like a download,
Yeah.
whatever that is, and you're in this pocket and it's in a specific moment and it's always together. The lyrics would come and the chords and everything would come at the same time.
And that's like magic to me, honestly, because like there wouldn't be a teacher in the world that could teach you how to do that. Like if you didn't just feel it, if you didn't have it. And that's like, I think about that a lot is like there are some people, I think there are two types of talent. There are the people that just have it, that it's just there. It's inside and they can be they can abuse their bodies and not do any vocal technique that you've ever heard of or like smoke incessantly and all of this. And they can get up and be perfect and just perform it. And it's like, the Amy Winehouses of the world where it's just like it's in her every moment of her life and like, her very sad story of her life, but like being so sick and unhealthy for so long, but still being able to like just turn on that switch and give that gift. So there's that. And then there's the people that can really dig down and learn the mechanics of it and get good at the mechanics of it and then turn the mechanics into the art, which is truly magic to me. It really is because yeah, what you're saying, what Flea is saying, like there is this mysticism to me, someone that can sit down with a chart, with a with notation, orchestrations, sit in front of a piano cold and just read this stuff like it's telling them exactly what to do. I don't know how that ever happens, and it is still
It's the
amazing to
exact
me.
same.
And it's not, yeah, it's like one of those things where sometimes when you like learn how the magic trick is done, it's not as entertaining anymore. And it's never that way for me. Like it is always still a magic trick, just seeing that. So I completely understand that. But I'm with you in that, like when I started, I just wanted to get as quickly as possible from point A to B, which was really born out of like, I just wanted to perform. I wanted people to like look at what I was doing. And I wanted, because I was a shyer, quieter person in the school days, and having a guitar on you, you could be a shyer, quieter person and let
For
the
sure.
guitar do the talking.
Make a lot of noise.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to get like going as quickly as possible. And I don't know. Maybe that wasn't the best way to go about it now, but who's to say? I guess there's always time. There's always time to learn.
Mm-hmm. You learned by like what has been, I mean, I know you're doing a lot with synths these days, but which is incredible, but what has there been another instrument that you aspire to learn one day? I mean, you're very multi-instrumental, so is there anything like I would love to learn how to sit down and dive more into this instrument?
Oh, well, thank you, by the way. Yes, there's an easy answer to that. That's piano.
Mm-hmm.
I think that piano is an amazing, beautiful instrument. It's an entire band orchestra in one. I mean, you've got the bass notes, you've got the mid range, you've got the high end, you can play top lines, you can play melodies, chords, rhythms, counters, calls and responses. It's all in one thing, which is incredible. Plus, they're beautiful visually, and just there's soft and there's curves and there's like, strength to it. And so I think like from that side, piano, 100%. I am not very I'm not a virtuosic player. Like I'm not the type of person that could ever I've gone through phases of like appreciating and loving virtuosos, and I just of any instrumentation. But it's never been me. It's I think when I used to think it should be me, and that was where I would get into like trouble, but it it is not me. So I'm really interested in doing a lot of different stuff, and getting it to the point that it sounds good to me. So pianos, synths, guitars, all of that. There's tons of room for improvement in all of those areas. But yeah, I think if I had to go with one, it would be piano, 100%. Just even having like the two, and it's a full body thing too. I can't even believe that. Yeah, so you're like two hands, your feet, you're doing so much stuff. It's like it can be so emotional, it can be ominous, it
Mm.
can be everything. I think it is the perfect instrument. I used to live in Astoria in Queens, New York, and at the end of my block, literally the end of the block, was the Steinway Piano Factory, and it had been there since the 1800s. And so it's still active. They still make pianos every single day. And I went on a tour there, and they give you a tour through the factory, and a large majority of it is still made by hand by human
Wow.
beings, which is just like another level of awesome, because here's like this skilled person that has dedicated their life to this craft, that is um can be done by a machine. And I think that obviously what Steinway would say is like the difference is in the Steinway is because we have these people making these things with their hands. And when you take this instrument home, it's like it's human. It has a soul. It's alive. It yeah. So this is a super long way to answer your question, and I'm sorry. But if there was one for you, what would that be?
Mm-hmm. I love string instruments, so
Mm.
I would love to learn cello, and I would love to probably learn how to play the harp. So I love using my hands, and I love playing guitar, and talk about two hands doing two different things, um, in different ways, and just I'm a big string instrument gal, so
Mm.
I would definitely be cello and piano. I love when I see people playing piano. I'm like, it's incredible. I have not sat down enough probably with the piano. Like when I play, it's only to track. That's kind of how I navigated. Like I can play some songs on piano all the way through with just your basic chords, but I use it more to track and production and I arrangement, and I But I do think it's the ultimate storytelling instrument out of everything. There's a lot going on. Like you said, it's full body. You're playing every section. Um, I think with more time, I would like to dive into it more, but definitely cello and harp. But I'm also a real master of none when it comes to instruments because I can play a lot of them, but I'm not particularly excellent at one of them. It's part of just being like interested in so many things all at the same time. I know enough to be able to track and to play, and that helps me learn, but I could never seem to focus on one instrument, even though there's been different parts of my life where I predominantly
That
played one
that
instrument.
must be like where your producer mind comes in, though. And I'm curious because I know my answer to this, but do you find that you kind of have that desire to keep seeking out new sounds and new instruments because it helps you with writing and ideas? And like if you have that beginner's mind, you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
always in that fresh, playful space. That was a leading
Yep.
question, I guess.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And sometimes it comes back to if you don't know theory, there's certain rules and guidelines that you can play with depending on what your key you are in, or so I feel like you have the freedom and exploration in that type of beginner's mind and childlike mind in playing instruments where you don't necessarily know the theory or the logical way of playing, what makes sense, especially during different scales or tunings, where you're supposed to be playing in that kind of like place. So production is actually a fairly new thing for me. So I'm interested in how did you get to that sound? How was that sound created? So when I pick up an instrument, I'm like, oh, that's probably a synth, not a bass, or maybe it's not a full drum kit. It's actually a drum pad. There's all these so many ways that I love learning. I love learning new things all the time. There's so much freedom when you don't know what you're doing, because then you find creative ways to find yourself. Yeah, I always tackle something, like even something that I know, like guitar. I'm always like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can always be learning more. There's always room for exploration, improvement. Even if something's so familiar, there's a real mindful practice, because you're always starting every day, a new day with a beginner's mind and seeing something from the perspective of the first time. Even something that's so familiar and common, you can always choose to see it from a different way, in a different perspective. But were you always like, how did you dive into production? You were playing in bands before in New York. How did you move into that space? And when you did you stop performing live? Did you move more into production? Did you navigate both? How was your journey? Because your sound design production is fantastic. It's so well balanced. And how did you get there? And how has that evolved and changed your journey through music?
Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, I feel the exact same way about your work too. Obviously, why we're here chatting and why we've worked together. So it's quite mutual. But thank you. Wow. I mean, I don't know. I always, I think it was by default sometimes that I was the one that was interested in the technical side. I've always been, to make a horrible analogy, it's like I wanted to be the lead in the play, but I always connected more with the stage crew and the people that were kind of helping make the show, which is, I guess, not a horrible analogy because that's exactly what I do in my professional life now. I help make
Right.
the show, or the commercial, or the movie. So that is exactly where I fell into. But I guess I always had that desire. So in the group of friends, I was the one that had the tape recorder. I was the one that then got the zip disc recorder. And
Oh
then
my
I was the
gosh.
one that got the flash drive recorder, and then the computer, and then, hey, this thing could actually turn into something of like a career and a job. I'll look at colleges for this. So I went to school, and then the computer became great. Now it's not just GarageBand, it's Pro Tools. And then Pro Tools turned into Ableton, and Ableton turned into going back to cassette, and it's full circle again. And so I just always fell into that role. I like being in control of that stuff. I like being the conductor. I like being
Mm-hmm.
the orchestrator. So like when we were in the studio in bands, of which I've been a part of many, I always fell into that role. I was the one that knew the language of Pro Tools. So I was always the one running the sessions. And we had a built-in engineer now. Great. We don't have to pay an engineer. We just got to find the studio. I
Mm-hmm.
so happened to work in studios. So it was just like my place that people would come to. Um, but I really liked that. I could hear kind of like the big picture without having all of the pixels put in place. Um, and so I think that's why I did so well with some of my older bandmates, because I could hear their ideas and where they were going to go. And I could help them get there quickly or quicker, or we could do it together, or I could fill out the rest of the picture and hear, kind of like I said to you when you asked me an email, like, how do you like to work? Do you like to work with stems, an idea, whatever? And I was like, anything. Like I'm
Yeah.
very good at, uh, I'm very good at seeing past kind of like, because like when you work with someone new, sometimes you want to be like, well, I intentionally left it bare. Like, don't worry, like I can do better. Or like you kind of like make those excuses. But I've I'm always so open to anything because I like trying to find the puzzle pieces and put them together and build the picture from something smaller. So I guess I just kind of fell into that role, and maybe it's going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, maybe it's how my brain works with kind of like the compulsion to keep things neat and organized. And uh, I guess, I guess maybe that's it. Is like it when I started accepting more of who I just really was versus who I thought I should be. I started becoming more comfortable in that role, and um, now in my own music, I get to do that all on my own, which is really cool. And the ideas kind of the time between the idea in the head and the idea on the metaphorical paper becomes quicker and quicker. Um, yeah, that's why. And also I like working with other artists too, because
Mm-hmm.
it can get kind of solitary and insular and isolated when you're just working by yourself. Um,
Yeah, well, you're like the king of collaborations over here. It's
mm,
awesome. It's awesome because you can see so many, like, I love when you release music and I can always find you in the
oh, cool.
collaboration.
Yeah.
And it's nice. I love that because I love when you can hear someone you don't know. And even if it's like on the song on the radio or wherever it is, and you're like, oh, that's Skrillex.
Mm,
You can
hmm.
tell just despite who you're playing with, who you're collaborating with. Um, I can always find your sound.
That's really awesome.
How did you start collaborating more? And was it because of the pandemic, of being more isolated, or
Uh,
were you always a big collaborator?
yeah, I mean, I think part of it was probably that I left bands and I left my home, and I had not really built a network here. So I found my footing in the world of this through, yeah, reaching out to people, social media, messaging people, just kind of coming across other artists and just wanting to. Maybe you're similar, but sometimes in those days when I'm not feeling super inspired to generate the idea from scratch, having at least somebody else's material to be kind of like the song starter is enough for me to get inspired. So I think that during the pandemic, during the time of high creative output, I just was like looking for as many people as I could meet and work with as possible because it was so fun to kind of like put your own fingerprint and wax on that and see like if, yeah, what you could do with it basically. Um, and it's been fun doing that. I know I've done a lot of them, and there are more coming out, even that I've
Awesome.
sort of, man, forgotten about. But I'm at a place now where this is, I guess, timely and relevant, but
Yes.
I have kind of like put the brakes on the train intentionally, which is the first time in 3.5 years that I've done that. And it is another just weird feeling. Like it feels really strange not to, like, as silly as it sounds, like open my Spotify for Artists app and see like the upcoming stuff. I don't have anything
Mm-hmm.
right there. And it's not that I don't have the material. It's just that I've wanted to kind of like stop and get more focused and intentional with what I put out. Um, I think I went through kind of like, for better or worse, a manic phase of just creativity with other artists. And that is now trickling out, which is fun because some of it happened a year and a half ago and some of it
Mm-hmm.
happened a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like ours, we just kind of did it and
That's
scheduled
pretty
it and got
quick.
it out. Yeah.
Yep,
Which is
we
how
did
I
it.
love to work.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's close enough now that by the time this airs, I will be able to officially say it. But I'm working with a record label. I'm working with Network. And I'm signing with Network as an official artist with them, which is incredible, and I'm really excited about.
Amazing.
But I had a record that was slated to come out in April, and that's kind of around the time that we started talking to each other, the label and I. And the record felt like it had been done for a year and it had been sitting and ready to go and kind of
Mm.
in the hopper. And it just felt like sketches. It felt like rough mixes and demos. And instead of keeping the train
Mm.
going just to keep the train going, which is like feeding the social media beast, which is it's
Mm-hmm.
never satisfied. Um, I decided to stop, pull the record, and kind of like end that release cycle, for the better, I think, because the album is now headed to mastering in a couple of weeks, and it is probably it's the most proud I've felt about material since, like, recording my own music. It feels
Wow.
really great. I was able to pull basically the way I had been describing it to people is taking the finished product and making that the starting point for this whole new record. So I took
Wow.
every track that was on there. I threw some out completely, but I basically used them as the starting point for the new material. So what I thought at the time was my best work is now the starting point for where I'm trying to push myself to go. So now I'm hopeful that this is going to be even better and worth the wait, and it'll make the splash that I'm hoping it does. And kind of like, we both make music in a very weird genre, like that people don't normally, like if you go out to dinner or a bar, or like if you want to get into the car with your friends, like you're not throwing on an ambient album. Like it's
No.
very personal, one-on-one type of thing. And my goal with this record is like people like my wife, people like her friends that don't listen to ambient music, don't maybe actively choose it or even know like how to consume it. I
Mm-hmm.
want this record to be the gateway to that, where it's like, I don't know. That's what I'm hoping for, because I just want ambient music and the type of music that we all create to like be taken seriously and not just be playlist material.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want it to be records that can really become a part of your day, a part of your life, and maybe help you discover something about yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. And that's what I really tried to do on the podcast. I'm always interested in the story about the song or the feeling of the song or what else has inspired you to write this. I try to always highlight the artist instead of something that's always thrown on the background and maybe passively being listened to. Um, how do we listen less in a passive way, more in an engaged way? I try to um, I think about it both sides because I don't want to streamline and pigeonhole artists into a certain space, like music for anxiety, music to meditate to. Not that I want to just keep them in those types of contexts. They are supportive. The music is supportive in those ways. But how can we still do that, but also highlight the artist? How can we talk about the feeling that inspired the song or whatever it is? How do we highlight the artist and a little bit more versus just passively listening? So instead of, oh, this is music to fall asleep to, can we give it a little bit more love? How do we create more engaged listening versus, passive listening?
Yeah, and you're doing an amazing job. And also, like, what you do is already so different than what other ambient musicians and artists do. Is like you're talking about it. You're putting your face out there too, which is like so many
So
times.
it's always uncomfortable.
Yeah, but that is it. Exactly. Like it is uncomfortable, so most people don't do it. And I think that with what you're doing and how you're trying to invite people in, it's doing such a like service to this type of genre and this type of music. And I'm sure like with other people, that you talk to, ambient musicians also aren't always the best articulating things, but sometimes they have like too much to say, which is what I feel
Yeah,
like is
that's
going to
true.
be for you editing this episode. So
Not at all. Honestly, very happy to dive deeper into like this is what it's all about, and how do we put more of a personalization to the music being played instead of passively listening, and how do we boost this more for everybody because it's I think that it's just really powerful genre for many different reasons, and
and
so
it's
I'm
an
very
awkward it's an
go
awkward
ahead.
thing too. Like we all, sorry to cut you off, but like it's a genre that we all are screaming for people to pay attention to not pay attention to it. So it's like
Exactly.
this, again, to use the word, it's very paradoxical. Like it which I kind of love, and it is also challenging to, yeah, please pay attention to this thing that you're not really supposed to pay attention to. But I'm saying that because just in case you find it really boring,
Yeah.
but that's actually, I really want you to pay attention to this in great detail is usually where I'm at with that.
I'm very excited to hear about an album. Very, very excited. And because I believe your last album was in 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, the
I think it
last
was Moods.
the last full one was Mood Switch. Oh, thanks. Thank
Big
you.
fan.
Yeah, so this one will be another 12 track. I've done a handful of EPs and a few. Intention 2 was the last thing that I did, which came out in December. That was like the last solo thing I did, and then it was just been a whole bunch of reworks since then, and collaborative pieces with you as well, which everybody listening should totally go stream Pen Pal right now.
Yes. Look up Pen Pal, Six Missing and Gollden. If you haven't, we're not judging, it's fine, but
Yes.
you should definitely go and check it out.
Yes. Artwork done none other by Collette. But
that's how you kind of have to do everything.
Yeah.
You're incredible with your visuals. You do video, you have background for those videos. You have an incredible way of posting. Not only do we have to be audio competent, we have to be the visual too. And those things take so much time. They take long. We were talking about this together. I just focus more on the music, and that's where I don't try to spend too much time on the visuals, but it's so hard not to when you're trying to be in a certain theme or vibe of what you're going for. What did I just release? How does that look with the other discography? The discographies become so digital as well as you want. Like, how do you curate without being too structured in the curation? Being an independent artist, it's so hard to always navigate around all these things you got to focus on because you want to focus on the music side and And then you also have to spend other time on the other facets and parts of being a
Yeah,
musician
I
and an
mean,
artist.
well, I don't know. So yeah, it's like it's sharpening a knife, really. I think that it makes you get more precise and more like less fussy in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for me specifically, it comes down to the limitations again. Like because I don't want to kind of belabor this release, this artwork, this video. I kind of just I have the time now. I want to do it now, and then it'll be done. So I don't know. I think it's like heard Rick Rubin talk about it. Every producer that is worth their salt, like, will tell you like sometimes it's not about how much you add. It's like what you take away
Mm-hmm.
from it and what is left. And as long as the stuff that's left is really good and important and substantial, then it doesn't matter how much you need to have around it. When you had asked me when you did the episode with the nature sound, the
Mm-hmm.
nature field recordings. I know how to
Mm-hmm.
talk words, don't worry. And you asked about when the trees sleep, and I opened it back up and I was looking at it because it had been a while. I was like, oh yeah, like that's so funny. There are two layers in here. That's all that track is. It's like a synth instrument and a piano, and then field recording. And that's all that needed to be. I mean, not everything needs to be that simple, but if you're getting your point across with that amount, you're
True.
just weighing it down if you keep adding to it. And that's definitely a skill that has to be honed and kept toned like a muscle all the time in the studio. Um, and Yeah, so to kind of loop back to what you were saying about doing everything all at once, I think I that's the stuff that I enjoy, but I enjoy getting the knife sharpened in the other areas where it's like like at the end of the day, you're making an Instagram video
Mm-hmm.
and like realizing what it is. Like I'm not
Very
making a
true.
film that's going to be shown in a film festival. I'm making something that somebody's more than likely going to flick past in a thumb scroll or watch without the sound on. And,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
just have to recognize it for what it is and place your focus and your time and your effort in the places that are really important to you. So for me, it is important to have the context, to control the context of being Six Missing and what that all
Mm-hmm.
looks like to
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's kind of like coming upon me digitally. But for me, it is 100% the focus is like, I don't give a shit what the video really looks like. If the video is out, it's done. Done is better than perfect. And if the sound is shit, like then I shouldn't be doing it at all. So I think for me, it comes down to the sound. It's always the sound. It's always ever been the sound. And like that's what I want for this project for Six Missing. It's like a rich, deep, immersive uh sound experience. And anything other than that, then it shouldn't go out. Like it just put it away then. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And I
so
really love that because you're like really keeping your focus and you're keeping the highest priority of your focus on what you have
mm,
to do. And in a way, you're detaching from any other, like something, you're not getting worried about what this looks like versus how much as it sounds like. So you're moving from that point. I've never
mhm.
really thought of it that way. I see it more as a whole package, but I feel like there's a lot less stress about it if I can think about it that way. Keeping your focus while you're here, what you're doing, and everything else around it is kind of secondary to, as long as the sound is good. Um,
Yeah.
that's kind of all the highest priority.
Yeah. Well, to bring this conversation completely full circle with something that I made a reference to at the beginning, Parks and Rec, there's a character, Ron Swanson. He has a quote, his character has a quote that says, never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And I think that
Sick.
like that is just so true. Like I think that the
Mm,
visuals, the writing, the website, the artwork, all of that stuff, those are nice to haves. But like if there was anything that ever had to be kind of like dropped off because we've gone over the weight limit, it would be any one of those over the sound. The sound has to be, for me, the most important thing. I guess for visual artists, it's probably like sound is maybe secondary, and that should
For
be the way
sure.
that it is. For artists and sculptors or dancers or writers, like everybody has to just successful people, I think, find that one thing and hold on to it for dear life. And like that's the thing that you're gonna like, what do they say? Die on a hill for or something like that. Like if that's the thing that you go down with, that's good, you know?
This is sort I'm gonna die on.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Um, so yeah, but you're right. We're being forced as artists. We're being pushed in a lot of different areas to be good at a lot of different things that not all of us are very natural with or very inclined to want to do, which is again why I think what you're doing is amazing. Is like you're you're stepping out of that and you're actually really like putting the rubber to the road and like speaking and talking and being out there and like inviting people in. And I think that that's awesome. And like that, thank you so much for having me on to even just talk about my little corner of the world of it.
Of course. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about, just to share the love and highlight the incredible work that you're out there doing and wanting to share it, and it's important and it matters, and if that can help people in any way, their journey through life, their day, there's no better way to do that through sound and music. So it's kind of what this is all entire podcast, and kind of my movements recently. And just making those connections, not feeling so isolated in this big, grand ambient space. Because it can be isolating because you're always on your own. But when you can collaborate, and this is kind of my way of collaborating, which is just to connect and show love and support in any way possible. So yeah, I'm sure it will grow and evolve over time, but I'm so happy to have you on and so looking forward to everything. You have some exciting things coming up, and I can't wait to follow your journey through that. And just, I can't wait to see. I'm always excited to see what you're doing, but
Thank you.
The feeling that I feel from the new album feels different than anything else that you have put out before. So I'm excited because you feel that. That will be very interesting to witness as a listener.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how it is received. Like, anything when you put something out, um, that's kind of another reason why I just started releasing everything I was working on, because I really think it's important to get comfortable with that feeling of completing something, being done with it, and like letting it go, seeing how it does, and honestly being comfortable with the failures as much as you are with the successes. Like it's
A balance.
yeah, and you can only do that if you put it out, I think. And like if you're an artist, I don't know. I guess I was gonna say if you're an artist that only creates for yourself, that is just as fulfilling as an artist that creates for other people. But I just am always of the mindset that like share it, share your art. The world needs art more than we've ever needed it, like positivity and places of love and all of this that just is God, like swallowed up by seas of negativity and hate and really, really dark shit these days. And so why, keep that for yourself? I mean, it's okay if you want to, that's fine. But like, I think that you should put it out. So yeah, I'm excited that was my soapbox moment. I'm excited to see how this goes over, because I feel like in just even what we were talking about, it encompasses for the first time, everything, like my musical history. It has guitar, that isn't buried. It is kind of like a main character, which is interesting for me. And it would kind of just happen by accident. And then that defined the sound for the record. And I just kind of kept going with it. So the guitar is there, piano is there, all characteristic things that you had mentioned, like that I try to go for with Six Missing stuff is like strings and textures and field recordings and ambient with a little bit of psychedelic and a little bit out there, experimental, but also grounded compositionally. And it has just it all. Like it really feels like this is for the first time me really not trying to hide who I am. It's just this is me, and we'll see. We'll see. I hope it goes over well.
Yeah, and I love this. It sounds like it's also, in a way, full circle, going back to your roots of instruments and when you began, and the amount of growth that you've probably have had over the last how many years of playing. It must feel really good to release something that finally really feels like you, and full embodiment of what that is. I'm really excited for you.
Thanks. Yeah, and I don't know if anybody that is listening to it or listening to this is feeling stuck, like with creativity or anything. It's just it is a slow process, and I am not speaking from a place of like the finish line at all. Like I am very much within the marathon, and only on mile 2 at the moment, and like you got a whole long race to go. So you got to pace yourself, but also I wouldn't have felt comfortable or confident or had the vocabulary that I have musically now to release this if I hadn't gone through all of the other stuff and the exercise of releasing music and putting it out and trying to find my voice in such a kind of broad genre. So just keep going, just keep doing what feels right and what feels good, and you'll find it.
I love that. I think that that's like very nice note to end on, and just words of inspiration for yourself and other people that might be listening and also in that same space, just to keep going. And piece of advice that I have too is just upload and release. Just upload and release. Just keep doing that and keep doing it. And yeah, very excited.
You never know what's like. I mean, so many of those, like Billie Eilish, like that's what they did, right? They just were SoundClouding basically. Like, and one of their tracks, like, now it's, I mean, many artist has those stories, and I don't know how you're going to be discovered if you're, kind of staying quiet.
Very true.
Yeah, but thank you so much for having me on to do this. This is like,
course.
I could probably sit here all day and just talk about this stuff. So
of course. And I'm sure, and especially before the album comes out, we can do something as well. And how do we support you? And for everyone who's listening, like, what is the best way to support you other than through listening through, what's the best way, Bandcamp or?
Yeah, great question. I think any way that you can listen is supporting. Any way that you feel comfortable. I'm in all of the places that you would normally find music, and if you're somebody that likes to support, I mean, the best place to listen to is Tidal, Amazon. Those pay the artists kind of the most. If you're a dedicated Spotify user, great. That works. If you love Bandcamp, it'll end up there eventually. And if you just don't like paying for music at all, you can listen to it on SoundCloud, or like just send me an email and I'll send you the WAV files. I don't care. Like, I just want you to hear it any which way you can. So that's the best way to do it.
That's amazing. And we'll definitely support your release upcoming. And I'd love to be able to help that in any way possible, because I love what you're doing and it's very inspiring, and very, very excited for you. This is kind of a new journey. It feels like it could be an intro into a new chapter for you. So It's very exciting.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. If you want to check out more from Six Missing, please support his music through the links that are posted in the descriptions of this podcast. Please like, please listen, please buy, please share. Otherwise, I hope you join me in the anticipation of his new album and something that will be a real treat for any music fan. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.